Welcome to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio, bringing you insights and strategies to help you create a magnificent and fulfilling second half of life. Here's your host, certified professional retirement coach and best-selling author, Dr. Dorian Mintzer.
Hi, I want to welcome all of you to my fourth Tuesday Revolutionize Your Retirement Interview with Expert series. I'm Dorian Mintzer, owner of Revolutionize Retirement and your host for the series. So now I want to introduce Fred Mandell, who's our guest for today. Some of you, I think, on the call probably know Fred or have heard him speak before. I think over the years, Fred, this is probably the third time that you've been my guest, because your journey and programs just keep evolving. And his focus today is on using art to navigate life's transition. So let me tell you a little about Fred. He's the founder and principal of Creating Futures That Work. It's a consultancy that draws on the precision and focus of science and the insights and skills of the arts to elevate leader effectiveness in the areas of collaboration, innovation, organizational culture, and professional development. Prior to establishing the program, which is CFTW, with Harvey Seichter, Fred served as a senior executive with American Express, where he built leading marketing and sales businesses and ran a multi-million-dollar investment company. During his tenure, he introduced new business models for the practice of fee-based financial planning into a large financial services institution. In 2014, Fred launched the Global Institute for the Arts and Leadership, a not-for-profit entity whose mission is to build a more peaceful, sustainable, and beautiful world by using the arts to catalyze social change, and he currently serves as chairman of the board. He's the author of Can Art Save Us? And the co-author with Kathleen Jordan of Becoming a Life Change Artist, 7 Creative Skills to Reinvent Your Life at Any Stage. He's been teaching the #1 rated leadership series at MIT Sloan School of Management, called The Leader as Artist. He's been teaching that since 2013. The Leader as Artist series is unique in the way it demonstrates the application of the art-making process to innovate leadership and organizational vitality. As an artist, Fred has been featured in the National Publication Gallery Guide, and most recently, his bronze self-portrait has been commissioned for the International Conference on the Self, or the Soul, co-sponsored by the University of Chicago and the Sorbonne. Fred holds a PhD in history from the University of Chicago and a master's in education and psychology from Boston University. He has 3 grown children, 6 grandchildren, and lives in Linfield, Mass. with his wife, Karen, who's a writer and teacher. And just full disclosure, I met Fred in 2007 through the Life Planning Network, and I participated in his training program based on the book Becoming a Life Change Artist, and have integrated many parts of that over the years. And I also have been part of the current program that he has and have become a certified innovation coach. I've always been impressed by Fred's thinking and approach, and that's part of why I bring him to all of you too, because there's just something so wonderful, Fred. I'll talk to you directly now about how you think, how you ask questions, and the creative ways that you integrate science and the arts. So I'm so delighted that you're here with us today.
Thank you, Dory. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And
welcome. What?
Very happy to be here.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to start with maybe giving us a sense on sort of what got you interested. I mean, you've made so many kind of transitions and changes in your life. What got you to where you are now, of integrating the art so much with coaching? I just thought that would be a good place to start. And I do want to, again, remind people, I think I might have forgotten to say it, there are slides today, but don't worry. On the event page, there's a PDF of the slides, and Fred knows that not everybody will be seeing them today while we speak, so he will, to the best of his ability, describe some of the slides. But just know that if you go to the event page, you can have access to the handout, you can print it out, and if you're listening afterwards, you'll be able to see the slides as you're listening. Okay? So, Fred, what got you here?
Oh, my goodness. That's a life journey. I don't know if I'm prepared to describe that long, long road. But I think a good starting point would be in my mid-50s. I was a senior executive at American Express, and I felt stuff roiling around inside of me, and I decided that I would enroll in a sculpture workshop as a way of finding different ways of expressing what was inside of me. So that led to a deep interest in art and art making. I continued to enroll in classes, and I was soon doing one-person shows of my sculptures, then painting and drawing. So that was an exciting journey. But during that time, I did a deep dive into the lives and working processes of the great masters of art, because I was curious about what enabled them to sustain their creative effort over a lifetime. So what struck me when I did that deep dive was that the creative process of the great masters paralleled the creative process of leaders in organizations as they attempted to build an enterprise or a business or an organization. And that the very skills that they cultivated over a lifetime were the very skills that were necessary to navigate change in the world that we are living in today. So that's sort of the background of how I moved from being an executive in business into fully engaging myself in the arts. But what I'd like to do is kind of re-engage the audience in terms of setting a context for some of the work that I'm doing now as it relates to the arts. So the title of this part of the talk is Why the Arts Matter, from Expression to Learning to Impact. So let's step back and take a look at some contextual factors that are in play in our environment today. So the first slide is titled Factoid, and the subtitle is PACE, P-A-C-E, PACE. And it points to the fact that it took radio 38 years, TV 13 years, the internet 4 years, and Facebook only 9 months to reach 50 million users. What that goes to is the whole notion that things don't only change, but the speed or the pace at which they change is accelerating in the world around us. My next slide really points to, is titled Factoid, Leverage. So it's really interesting the way in which the changes in the world around us, specifically as it relates to technology, creates incredible leverage. So in 1990, at its peak, digital equipment had $14 billion in revenues, was one of the most profitable companies in the country, and employed 100,000 people. So you fast forward to 2009, and this new technology-based business emerges. It's called WhatsApp in 2009. When it was bought 5 years later by Facebook, it was purchased for $14 billion and only had 55 employees. So you're going from 14 billion to 14 billion, from 100,000 employees to 55 employees. That is called leverage. So let's go one step further. This next slide is called Factoid, and the subtitle is Disruption. There was a prediction made in 1995 by the head of the MIT Media Lab, in which he projected that we'll soon be buying books and newspapers straight over the internet. Don't forget, this is 1995. The internet was hardly born. So Clifford Stoll, who was a former astronaut, actually responded by saying, oh yeah, sure. So how come my local mall does more business in an afternoon than the entire internet handles in a month? So he was a skeptic. Well, guess what else happened in 1994, 1995? That was the birth of Amazon. So if we were to take a look at Amazon today, a couple of data points. One, almost 20% of retail sales in the country comes from online. And of that 20%, 40% of it comes from Amazon. So the skeptics back in 1995 really didn't know what they were talking about and had no idea of the disruptive capability of technology. So let's go one more slide. This one is called Factoid, and the subtitle is Prediction. This slide shows a cellular phone in 1988. In fact, it's called the 88 model. It sold for $1,499, and it's a clunker. You really couldn't put it in your pocket, certainly not your breast pocket. And in this ad for this cellular phone, they are bragging. What are they bragging about? Well, it will fit into your briefcase. It's only 1.5 inches thick. And what else about it? Well, it's light. It only weighs 28 ounces. So as a result, people are beginning to nibble at cellular phones. I don't know how many people knew others who had cell phones in 1988. I didn't know that many. So IBM undertook a study. They were thinking of entering into the market, and they looked at the potential for that market. So they published their findings in 1989, and they said that the maximum market for cell phones in the U.S. is only 1 million units per year. So IBM decided not to enter the cell phone market. So here's another one of my favorites as it relates to predictions. This is called Factoid Prediction, and it's a quote from a Business Week article in 1968. It says, with over 15 types of foreign cars already on sale here in the U.S., the Japanese auto industry isn't likely to carve out a big share of the market for itself. 1968. Well, look on the road today. The reality is that Japanese autos represent almost 40% of the U.S. market. So this is interesting. What all this points to is a very new world that we're living in, one that is characterized not only by speed, but accelerating speed. It is characterized by disruption, not just business disruption, but political, social, environmental disruption. It's characterized by a lot of uncertainty, as represented by the fact of our supreme inability to predict the future. It is what some people call a VUCA world. Now, I think that there are a lot of reasons for optimism about the future, but it's very hard in this world of uncertainty to get too comfortable. So I think that there are 2 points I'd like to make by these slides. One is the uncertainty of it all. We don't know what's coming next. We don't know what's going to be disrupted next. I read the New York Times, the front page, and it looks like every column in some way or another is about what is being disrupted. But the other thing I'd like to mention is that we have proven to be very bad at predicting. So if that is the case, what is the appropriate response to this new environment? What's the appropriate response, and what are the resources we have for responding? So let me just mention something here, and that is, I call this a river story. And I'd like to share with the listeners an experience I had pre-COVID. I was invited to do a presentation in Minneapolis to a group called Mentium, and it was for women executives and high potential leaders in a wide range of organizations. And after the presentation, I was asked to have lunch with about 12 of these high potential executives. During lunch, one of the women raised a question, that is, she was clearly distraught. She said that she was heading up a major initiative in her organization, that she was working 10 to 12 hours a day, that she had 2 kids at home that she was trying to manage, that one thing after another seemed to be thrown at her. She felt in her words that she was at the bottom of a river and the rapids were flowing over her. And all she wanted was to get to the other shore. Fred, what do I do? Well, I was speechless because the sad part is that that's the story that I heard many, many times. And my response might not have been that empathic, but I do believe it was true. And I said, I don't think you're going to be happy with my answer, but there is no shore. It's all river. So the question is not, how do I get to the other shore? But how do I learn to navigate the river in such a way that I can stay on top, on the surface, continue to add value, develop a greater sense of control? So I think that that's the world that we're in. There are no shores anymore. Some people, especially after COVID, talk about this notion of new normal. People keep on saying, well, when the new normal arrives, when we figure out the new normal, things will be different, with the expectation that there will be a new normal. I have a different view. Not normal is the new normal. So we have to rely, I think, on our human ingenuity and creativity in order to learn how to navigate all of these changes and uncertainty. So I want to pause here for a quick second, take a sip of water, but then I want to bracket what I'm going to say right now, and that is, this is going to be a little bit of a diversion, but I'm mindful of the fact that this group is revolutionizing retirement. And so the demographic of this group is second half of life folks. But these contextual factors really affect everybody. One of the things I want to say is to acknowledge the very, very important contribution that folks in their second half of life can make to this challenge that we're facing around the notion that no normal is the new normal. When I was writing or doing research for the book, Becoming a Life Change Artist, I did a deep dive, I think I mentioned, into the lives and working processes of the great artists. And I was really heartened to learn that many of these great artists produced their best work in their second half of life. Whether it's Matisse, Picasso, Rembrandt, Renoir, Monet himself suffered from cataracts, but he kept on painting. Rembrandt suffered from bankruptcy, and he kept on painting. Goya, Francisco Goya, was deaf since his early 40s, and he kept on working. So they sustained that creative output. And I think that part of that relates to the fact that they brought a richness experience where we can provide, we can tap into new sources of creativity, including memory, dealing with adversity, and a sense of mortality. And I think that this also provides us with the opportunity for reflection and perspective, which is often called wisdom. But the other thing I believe that we bring to this challenge is this sense of generativity, this sense that we're all interconnected, and that we bring a language of caring to the way in which we engage in the future. So I do want to acknowledge that, and then I really want to come back to this notion of art and art making, and why I believe the arts are the best, richest, most impactful source for us to address some of these challenges. And I do it in the form of an acronym called CHIRP, C-H-I-R-P. The C stands for the arts are cathartic. They help us engage our emotions in an intense and purging way. The arts are hopeful because the stories embedded in the arts are powerful examples of overcoming. The arts are impactful because they give us the ability to navigate adversity. The arts are resonant because they connect with us. We connect with them. Our emotions vibrate when we're engaged in the arts. And they are practical. And I'm going to show you in a minute in what ways I believe they are practical. So if we were to look at the arts throughout history, I would divide it into two different broad categories. One is the first 20,000 years, where the arts basically were a form of representation. We humans tried to, at least in the visual arts, capture reality accurately and precisely. But beginning in the mid-19th century, maybe a little bit earlier than that, the arts began to experiment and rebel in really interesting ways. So it was characterized by a lot of experimentation. The arts then began to become available to researchers in the form of neuroscience and creativity. And that led to all kinds of insights in terms of the way the arts enhance our skills in really interesting ways. The arts were no longer simply a form of expression or even a form of experimentation. The arts were a way for us to immerse ourselves in the arts in a way that enhanced our skills. So one of the things that I have here is a slide, and it's an eye-tracking study. And the first slide shows a liberal arts student looking at a picture. And as he's looking at this picture, as represented by the eye-tracking study, you see that his eyesight is concentrated intensely in the middle of the picture, with 2 or 3 furtive glances to the edges and outskirts of the picture. I would say 80% of, or maybe 8% of the picture is taken in by the liberal arts student. The next slide, also an eye-tracking study, shows a fine arts student looking at the same picture. And what this eye-tracking study shows is that there is an effort on the part of the student to take in the entire canvas, to look at the picture at its edges, in the middle, on the sides, on the tops, on the bottoms. In fact, there's very little intense focus in the middle of the picture. This student is taking in 80% of the picture. So this shows that when you have arts training, your observational powers expand. Could you imagine if our observational capabilities were to expand from 8% to 80%, what the implications of that would be in terms of our ability to observe and understand the world? They could be pretty significant. So I now want to turn to what is a growing body of research and data that documents the impact of arts-based learning on individuals, students, learners, and so forth. The next slide shows the results of a study that was done in around 2012 to 2015 through a major grant on the National Science Foundation, and it was directed by my partner, Harvey Seister. It shows the impact of arts-based experiential learning in a number of different areas. This first slide shows if someone has only 3 hours of arts-based experiential learning training against the control group, their inquiry skills increase by a full 24%. If you were to look at the impact on innovation thinking, the next slide shows that with only 10 hours of arts-based experiential learning, the improvement in innovation thinking goes up by 33%. And then this final slide in the study shows, again, 10 hours. It looks at problem solving, and it shows that the group that went through 10 hours of arts-based experiential learning training improved their problem solving by a full 51%. So this study was released in 2015 through the Art of Science Learning and the National Science Foundation. And this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of its findings. But it's breakthrough research which looks at the impact of arts-based learning on a range of leadership and innovation outcomes. And the results are quite positive. So this next slide looks at the impact of arts-based learning on communication effectiveness. And it basically shows a control group where a conventional training on communications has a positive impact, but modestly so. When you introduce theater and music, the impact grows dramatically. But the interesting thing is when you then, as well as theater and music, introduce dance, the impact on communications is absolutely dramatic. So it's kind of interesting that dance would have such a powerful impact, but when we think about dance and movement as a form of embodiment of expression, and communication includes the way in which we embody and express ourselves, that makes more sense. So the last thing I want to do in terms of sort of the science and theory of the impact of arts-based learning is to show you a slide about which we titled Changing the World. And what this study does is it looks at the impact of the arts on Nobel-winning scientists. And it went back over 100 years, looked at all the Nobel Prize-winning scientists, and compared them to non-Nobel winning scientists. And what it shows is that the Nobel winning scientists were 17 times more likely to also be engaged in painting. They were 25% times more likely, or not likely, but they were 25 more times engaged in writing, whether it was poetry or fiction. And they were 20 times more engaged in the performing arts, theater, drama, dance, etc. So this clearly shows that there is a powerful correlation between being engaged in the arts and your performance as a scientist. So the question then, at least for me in my evolution, was to ask the question, if the world is changing, it's so uncertain, we're bad at predictions, what does the world need? And for me, the world needs a new set of navigational skills, a new mindset, a new set of behavior, and that there is growing evidence of the power of the arts to impact these things in a meaningful way. So for the past 20 years, Harvey Seifler, my partner with Creating Futures at Work, and I, initially independently and then through our company, are using the arts as a learning and development modality. We work with organizations and leaders in the areas of development, innovation, collaboration, and culture. And we do this through two primary means. One is through assessment, and the other is applying our learning portfolio. Let me talk for a minute about the assessment. But Harvey initially, through the National Science Foundation, developed a unique assessment instrument that measures the impact of training on a range of outcomes. What makes this instrument unique is it's the only one in the market that does not rely on self-reporting or does not rely on self-reporting in any way. Virtually every other instrument out there, whether it's Bassiter or Hogan or DISC or Leadership 360, they all rely to a greater or lesser extent on self-reporting. This instrument takes people through a series of scenarios and activities which require them to make decisions. Those decisions generate a wide array of data, and through that we're able to measure their skill level in four major categories: readiness to learn, cognitive agility, collaboration behaviors, activating innovation. And there are a bunch of 11 subscales under that as well. So we use that instrument to be able to identify where individuals and teams might have skill gaps. And then we come back. We use what we call our learning portfolio as a developmental intervention to help people develop the skills in the areas that they need development in. What we do is unique insofar as we are multidisciplinary. We don't simply use the visual arts. We use music, theater, dance, storytelling. We even use an ancient art form, Japanese art form called suminagashi painting. So those are the two key pillars of the work that we do. Something interesting happened during COVID. I'm sure you've experienced many moments of stepping back and reflecting during this time as well. What happened to Harvey and myself is we were approached by a number of coaches who looked at our material and asked us whether we'd be interested in creating a certification program. So we did that. And we just finished our first certification program. I think Dory referenced to her being a participant in it. And it consists of virtual group learning, asynchronous and peer learning, personal coaching. At the conclusion of the program, participants are certified to use our instrument, our assessment instrument, to interpret it, to present it, and use it as a developmental tool with their clients. They're also certified and introduced to facilitating a wide range of arts-based experiential learning interventions, workshops, and tools. So that is basically how our business has evolved and how we have responded to what we see as being a very different context in the world today. So with that, I'm going to pause, hand it back to Dory in terms of what you'd like to do.
Well, there's such a wealth of information that you shared, and I want to invite people to ask questions and submit them. So far, Kathy Jordan, who is your co-author, submitted a comment, which is, "Not normal is the new normal." She says, "Fred, you've captured reality so well." So I just wanted to offer that. And I do want to encourage people
Kathy.
to ask questions. You know, I find it sort of amazing to think about. And I know you had asked me, Fred, if I could comment a little of what it was like to be part of the program. And I was not one of the coaches that went to Fred and said, "Ooh, would you do something like this?" I learned about it, and as I said at the beginning, I just so value the learning that I have from Fred, so I just decided, let's just go for it. And I actually learned so much about myself. I didn't know how it would relate to me because I don't work in corporations. I work on an individual basis, therapy and coaching, but I found the experience just so illuminating for myself, and it's helped me, and I've incorporated parts now with clients, and will be, incorporating the assessment also, but I've just found it so eye-opening for me, and it made me realize that, in our work, those of you who are, coaches or therapists or whatever way we work with people, we're really thinking about kind of creating and innovating our own life, and that's what I sort of got clear in my mind, and actually have, some designs in mind of some workshops I want to do around with people on retirement, because, we really are trying to innovate and think about who we are as we create this next part of life. So I've just found it really interesting. And the other thing I wanted to say, and I had the same experience when I took the other training course with Fred a number of years ago. I'm not an artist, and I always say I'm not creative, although I've rethought that. I really realized there's so many different kinds of creativity. I had so much fun in this program and using art, and I realized how it just opens us. So I'm just sort of saying this because, I'm beginning now to use it more too, not just the conceptual part of stepping back from the canvas and looking at different lenses and angles and all, but really thinking about how art and movement, we had experiences with, the different forms of art. We had some improv, we had individual as well as group projects and stuff. And so my self-learning was just really challenged and great. I really learned a lot about myself. So I guess I just wanted to share that part. And until we get other questions from other people too, here there are some other questions now that I will incorporate. But I'm hoping, Fred, that maybe you can give some examples for, you gave a few, but sort of how you've used it both individually as well as in some of these leadership things, because not everybody on the call is, involved in that, and maybe share some insights on ways you are doing this integration. But let me just integrate a couple of questions now that have come. How do you think, so Andrew from Atlanta says, how do you think art training could help employees heal during the pandemic?
Wow, I think that's a wonderful, wonderful question. Lord knows we could use healing as a result of the wrenching experience of the pandemic. I don't want to, the arts are very broad, and there are many, many different arts. But one of the things that I think is powerful is the art of storytelling. And when we have the opportunity to tell each other stories about ourselves and our experiences, we develop a sense of connection. We develop a sense of empathy. We develop a sense of possibilities. And these stories become models or mirrors for us to hold up to ourselves and see how we are managing a series of events such as the pandemic and how we can heal. So if we think of storytelling as an art form, it really is, and it goes way, way back to the old campfires when we were an early man, and the power of those stories to hold a community and to give a community a sense of hope and purpose. I think that's one thing. So sharing stories is one way of doing it. I think reading stories and fiction of people who have navigated adverse life experiences and come out more whole, changed in positive ways, is another way of doing it. But I think that the arts, more than anything, broadly speaking, not just storytelling, but whether you think about the visual arts or music, I would encourage people to think about an experience they had with the arts. Maybe they were at a play or at a movie or at a museum or a concert, and they were deeply, profoundly moved by that experience. Maybe they were moved to tears. Maybe they were moved to their knees. I've certainly had that experience. There is that cathartic experience when we experience art, engage with art, that in and of itself, I believe, is deeply, deeply healing. So accessing art in its many forms, being present in it, and opening ourselves to the emotion that are evoked through the art experience, I think holds strong possibilities for healing.
That's a lovely response. Thank you, Fred. I think storytelling, both our own and hearing others, is such a way of connecting. But as you say, the other part is just opening ourselves to whatever emotions we have and not being afraid of feeling it is part of the healing too. So Kathy from both Florida and Washington says, Fred, do you see ABLE, or the arts-based experiential learning, as a tool for helping individuals in navigating the third age as well as corporate clients?
Kathy, thank you for that question. Kathy is my co-author for Becoming a Life Change Artist. Could not have a better co-author. And, I think, Kathy, you could probably answer this question as well as I could, but I think absolutely. The arts-based experiential learning equips us with navigational skills, whether you are in business or whether you're talking about life. And I think that's one of the wonderful, wonderful things about arts-based experiential learning. It's an integrating process, and one that helps us realize that the whole person needs to be engaged, and that in some ways the dichotomy between personal life transition and effectiveness in our professions it somehow needs to be bifurcated. It just doesn't make sense. So I think that arts-based experiential learning provides very practical learning experiences that develop specific skills that enable people to or develop a greater sense of I don't want to use the word control, but a greater sense of efficacy, a greater sense of empowerment to navigate change more effectively.
Great, thank you. Can you, I have more questions here, but as you were talking, I just remember sort of a focus on sort of life is not linear and sort of the non-linear aspect. Could you comment on that in terms of people and innovation and navigating change?
Yeah, change is not linear. I think everyone's experience, regardless of what the nature of change has been that they've been through, that it's not a linear process. In becoming a life change artist, Kathy and I put forward a model of change, which starts with what we call the dimension of being in a creative dilemma, which essentially means that we are feeling a tension between the current state of our lives and a sense that things could be different. That tension triggers a series of actions that lead us into two other dimensions. One is exploration, and the other is discovery. Exploration finds itself through experimenting different possibilities, doing research, just exploring what are the possibilities for me during my life transition. When we talk about discovery, we are talking about how, in the process of exploration, do I discern what makes sense, what has value for me, what is in alignment with my values. That then leads to the fourth dimension, which is integration. We take what we have learned through exploration, discovery, and we begin to integrate it into a new direction, into new attributes of ourselves. It enables us to become more whole as a person. Now, the thing about these four dimensions is that they are endless. We never stop going through these dimensions. And when it comes to exploration and discovery, we toggle between those two all the time. So it's not as though, okay, I'm in this exploration stage or dimension. No, okay, done with that. Now I'm fully into discovery. Doesn't work that way. And that speaks to the notion that we are learning and adaptive human beings. We learn, we adapt, we learn some more, we adapt some more, and ultimately we integrate what we are learning and how we are adapting into becoming more whole as a person.
Again, such a wonderful, reflective answer. Let me just integrate more of these questions here, because there's a lot. So Barbara from Cambridge says, can you offer a program that assisted living places could use, with classes in painting, dancing, play reading, music listening, etc.?
I'm not sure I got the full question, Dory.
Well, Barbara's asking if you think a program like this could be taken to an assisted living place and using art-based learning in an assisted living facility, integrating the different art forms, whether it be painting, dancing, play reading, music.
Yes, absolutely. So if we think about what I talked about were two things. What Creating Futures at Work does in terms of work in organizations and corporations. I also talked a little bit about the coach certification program. But underlying those two things is the fundamentally rich array of arts-based experiential learning experiences. They can be brought into schools. They can be brought into assisted living. They can be brought into any area of our life. The fundamental premise here is that the arts as a way of learning, as a way of healing, as a way of growing, as a way of connecting, as a way of doing all those things with a little bit of work can be brought into virtually every aspect of our lives and in the various organizational forms that it takes.
Right. So Patrice from Massachusetts says, with the distraught woman that you described in the river story, feeling like she couldn't get to shore in mind, can you talk about how you would help her using your programs or elements of it?
Well, I did not get to work with her specifically, individually, but I have worked over the years with many people like her. And what we do is we do this through coaching, and we do it by understanding the environment in which they're working. What we would do today would be to have her take our assessment instrument. That would identify where her strengths and developmental opportunities are. We would then call on our array of arts-based experiential learning, whether it's a workshop or an individual activity, and begin to apply those to her situation. Hello? I don't. Is that me?
No, sorry. I have all my different phones in here. I just have to get rid of them. Sorry.
Hello?
Sorry, I forgot that I didn't put the phones out once I decided to use my cell phone. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Go on. Were you in the middle of?
Yeah. So I would basically respond by saying we would use a combination of our assessment instrument and elements of our learning portfolio to equip her to deal with the challenge that she faces. On a practical level, her issues or challenges may be related to decision-making, prioritization, collaboration, the way in which she organizes her work. It could. That's the presenting problem. What underlies that would be part of the assessment that we go through. And the way in which we would address those would be by using all of the arts-based learning tools at our disposal. I'm not sure that's a satisfactory answer. It sounds a little bit general to me, but yeah.
No, I do think that you've talked about how now with the program you have, and like what I was trained in too, that it's a combination of the assessment that helps. I just remember some really interesting learning I had when I took the assessment, and then you, depending on what the issues are, you work on sort of where the gaps are, or making some of the skills
right.
that you have better, or or really just developing skills if you don't have skills in that area. So it could be used in a variety of different ways.
Yes.
It leads a little to Andrew's question from Atlantic, and he says, are group classes better than the private lessons using this?
Yes, that again?
Are group classes versus individual coaching, group coaching versus individual coaching, is one better than the other from your perspective, or?
No, it all depends upon what's best for the client, what the client is trying to accomplish. Sometimes the client is an individual, sometimes it's an organization, and sometimes, in fact, you end up doing group work and pulling people into individual coaching as well. So I would not say there is a superior or inferior way of doing it. Whether it's individual or group, there are significant benefits to it.
Thanks. So Dorothy from Richmond says, what role does active imagination play in your ideas about art-based learning and its ability to bring to the world what it needs?
I love that question, and because we are trained to solve problems and think about the world in a fairly conventional way. And by that I mean through critical thinking, through analytic thinking, through identifying patterns and analyzing those patterns and so forth. So we are taught to value logic and the sort of one-step, two-step problem-solving model. What is neglected and left out are intuition, emotions, gut, imagination, all those other sources of insight and knowing that are tremendous. I think it was Einstein who said, logic will get you from A to B, imagination get you everywhere. So there is this need, I think, to not only help people cultivate imagination, and I can't think of anything that does it better than the arts, but to begin to recognize the value of imagination in the way in which we leverage our imagination to make a difference in the world.
Alan's question, he's from Cambridge, says, how do we avoid feeling that the art we create is not very good?
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I'll tell you, I'll share with you a personal orientation. I call myself a perpetual student. I never claim to be a fully developed artist. As long as I think of myself as a student, it allows me to make mistakes, to be humble, learn from others, and to give myself into the joy of creation. So one of the things that I talk about in my book, Can Art Save Us?, is the notion of being lost and found at the same time. When I am deeply engaged in art, I am simultaneously lost and found. I'm lost because I often have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know how to solve a particular problem. I feel like I am not simply a student, but not a very good student. So I'm literally lost, and it really challenges my sense of fortitude and my ability to stay with it. But simultaneously, I feel I am found because I believe that I am engaged in doing what I am meant to be doing. So even during that period of challenge, I am holding both a potential sense of failure and a potential sense of exhilaration. It's hard to explain, and it's weird, but in those moments, what I end up creating matters less than going through that process of creating. And if I am true to that, if I maintain integrity and don't allow myself to take shortcuts, I do believe it will lead to interesting work.
Again, a lovely answer there. And I just wanted to share from my own personal experience. I mentioned that I don't think about myself as creative. I had so much fun, I think I did say this earlier, with the arts part. And I honestly see myself as creative now. I mean, and I want to open up more space and time to do more art myself, because part of the way art can be used just kind of can open you to different ways of seeing things and looking at things and sort of appreciating, in a sense, the disruption. You know, one of the exercises is create and then disrupt it again. And, you know, and it generates a lot of feelings, and there's so much learning, just using that one example. So I do want to honor the time. Fred is able to stay just a short time longer, and there are a few more comments and questions I want to integrate. A couple of more comments and questions. Meg from Cambridge says, and this is a little bit of a sermonette meant to be thought-provoking. She says, I agree about the power of stories and suggests that we need to revive the fundamental story that we've told ourselves for millennia, that we humans are separate and thus engaged in a zero-sum game encouraging fear-based greed and conflict. This is less about navigating change than changing the basic paradigm that is quickly leading to destruction of all that we hold dear. How can we use the arts in general to foster radical learning transformation that the times call for? She says, I think you've answered it, at least generally, but I just wanted to still bring it up in case, you know, there were other things you might want to add in relation to that question.
Leave it to Meg to ask such a powerful question. Yeah. So I think that engaging in art in itself is an act of radicalization. Because if you think about it, the act of creating art is an act of origination. It doesn't allow you to resort to artifice. It doesn't allow you to cheat. It requires that you be honest with yourself and draw on your powers of observation about the world to be real about the world. So one of the things that has been true about art throughout its history is its ability to create new frames of reference, new paradigms. The very notion, for instance, in the visual arts, that the purpose of art is to represent the world as accurately as possible, was dramatically changed by Turner and by the Impressionists, that basically said the purpose of art is to capture the emotions that are evoked in us, not representation. And then you get someone like Kandinsky who comes along and then who is called the grandfather of abstract art, who changes the paradigm again, and so on and so forth. So I think engaging in the arts teaches us ways to look at things through fresh eyes from different perspectives and create new paradigms. And I think that that skill, that capability, underwrites some of the things that Meg is referring to in terms of changing the paradigm about our humans' relationship to the world, to the environment, to each other. And so I think that's a very, I think they work hand in hand.
Thank you. And let's see, Diane sort of says, any suggestions on how to get society to value a fine arts education? STEM has all the emphasis, but STEAM seems to have been forgotten.
Yes, a great question, a challenging question. I don't have a formula for it. I don't know. I think that one of the things that we might want to reflect on is the role that the arts played during the pandemic and how it helped us endure and even rise above the challenges of the pandemic, whether it was street art or virtual performances or the building out of virtual museums, and having people really appreciate the way in which the arts really held us during this intensely challenging time will remind people the value of the arts. So if we can use that as a reference point, we may be able to craft messaging that will help educators appreciate the fundamental value of the arts in our education.
Great. Fred, there is a wisdom and eloquence that you have, and I was about to say it, and I see that Meg also has written that and said, thank you, Fred, for your eloquence and wisdom, and she thanks you for responding to her question directly. I always just find your presentation so insightful, and there is that wisdom and perspective that you bring. So I just want to thank you so much for being here today. And why don't you let people sort of know how to get in contact with you, the website you would like them to know, and then
Sure.
I'd like, if there's any kind of takeaway comment that you want to share as we say goodbye.
Sure. Well, to get in touch with me, my email address is in the PDF. It's F.A. Mandell with 2 L's. F.A. Mandell at Verizon.net. And I'd love to hear from any and all of you. In turn, the only thing I would say is an expression of gratitude for this community and for Dory to invite me to share my thoughts. You know, when you're in the journey, you're in the journey, and you don't have time to step back and reflect. So having the opportunity to speak to all of you has given me the opportunity to step back and assess and really process some of the questions and thinking that I've been doing. So I am grateful for that.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. And any just last comment? I mean, that may have been your last comment, which is fine, but any other thing in terms of art-based learning that you'd like to leave people with, or does it feel like you've sort of No, I mean, I would encourage every person to make a commitment over the next 2 weeks to engage seriously in some form of art.
whether it's going to a museum, listening to a concert, a play, taking a dance class. I don't care what it is, but engage. And I can guarantee that immersion will open up some things in you that you too will be grateful for.
What a wonderful suggestion. So hopefully those of you on the call will make a commitment to that and allow yourself to open yourself to various art-based learning experiences. So thank you again, Fred, and stay well and safe, and thank you everybody for being here today.
Thank you, everybody. Be well.
You've been listening to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio with Dr. Dorian Mintzer. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show, listen to past episodes, or download our free retirement transition guide, visit revolutionizeyourretirementradio.com.